Sir Humphrey Gilbert and Bartholomew Gosnold both fell short of finding Verrazzano's Refugio. In 1582, Sir Humphrey Gilbert was eager to set sail for America to set up a colony at the Dee River, what Verrazzano, in 1524, had called Refugio, and what is now Narragansett Bay, Rhode Island. The bay was named after John Dee, the legal and navigational mastermind behind the whole colonization effort. Gilbert and Dee decided to send a preliminary expedition of 2 ships to the New World under the leadership of Anthony Brigham. The ships departed from Southampton Harbor, England, in late July of 1582 and stayed in the New World for at least 9 months. I claim Brigham and a crew of stonemasons and carpenters were building the stone and mortar tower that still stands in Toro Park, Newport, to be the city center of the first colony of the British Empire. Not only did Dee design the tower, but he coined the term the British Empire. The new colony was to be an Anglican colony, and Sir Humphrey Gilbert was to be the governor. Gilbert's expedition was funded by the Catholic sympathizer Sir George Peckham on the promise from Sir Francis Walsingham, the Secretary of State, that the Catholics who settled in this new colony would be free to worship as they pleased. Gilbert finally assembled his fleet of 5 ships and set sail on June 11, 1583. 2 days offshore, the crew of the largest supply ship caught a contagious disease, and the ship was forced to return to England. This was the bark Raleigh, captained by Sir Humphrey Gilbert's younger half-brother, Sir Walter Raleigh. 4 of the ships made it to St. John's Harbor in Newfoundland, where Gilbert claimed for Queen Elizabeth the whole land 500 miles around, in August of 1583. More of Gilbert's crew members got sick, so they sent one of the smaller ships back to England. After a 2-day stay at St. John's, Gilbert and his 3 ships were headed south down the coast towards Narragansett Bay. Then more bad luck. A tempest blew the one remaining supply ship into a sandy shoal, and the ship was crushed to pieces. Gilbert headed his 2 remaining ships back towards England, determined to return to America the following year with more men and supplies. But off the coast of the Azores, he hit another huge tempest. A huge wave swallowed Sir Humphrey Gilbert and his ship. One battered vessel, captained by Edward Hayes, limped back to England to relate the details of the ill-fated voyage. Now let's flash forward 20 years, from 1583 to 1603. Queen Elizabeth died in March of 1603, and King James took the throne. At first he was tolerant of the English Catholics, but when rumors spread that a Catholic coup d'etat was about to happen, James cracked down on the priests. The English Catholics determined that settling a colony in America would be a wise course of action. David Beers Quinn, the most noted authority on Elizabethan exploration, suggests that the catalyst of this new colonization idea might have been the Earl of Southampton, Henry Wriothesley. Yes, this is the same Henry Wriothesley who was the patron of Shakespeare. Wriothesley had been imprisoned by Queen Elizabeth for being a co-conspirator in the Essex Rebellion, but he was later released by King James. Here's what David Beers Quinn writes about the Gosnold mission. Wriothesley appears to have invested in a small expedition to America under Captain Bartholomew Gosnold in 1602. This was a reconnaissance to the area which had already, in 1582, been thought of as a site for a settlement. It was proposed to try out its resources by setting up a small trading post on its shores. Gosnold returned to England, leaving no settlers behind, but bringing a description of an attractive, sunny, and accessible land across the ocean in what is now Massachusetts. His discoveries were rapidly given publicity in a little book by John Brereton, which went into 2 editions, while Sir Walter Raleigh, Edward Hayes, who was Gilbert's old companion, and the Reverend Richard Hakluyt, whose 2nd edition of The Principal Navigations had been completed in 1600. They all involved themselves in this scheme. Now, Sir Walter Raleigh and Edward Hayes were 2 of the 5 captains on Gilbert's 1583 fleet. In 1582, Richard Hakluyt had written the sales brochure, as I call it, entitled Diverse Voyages Touching on the Discovery of America. He was drumming up support for Gilbert's expedition. Bartholomew Gosnold was a protege of the great historian Richard Hakluyt. In Hakluyt's book is a translation of Giovanni Verrazzano's 1524 description of Refugio. So it's pretty certain that Gosnold had these descriptive clues. Here's what Hakluyt's original looks like, but the type is a little hard to read. So here it is, a modern transcription in which I have emphasized key phrases, which I will emphasize here. We discovered an island in the form of a triangle, distant from the mainland 3 leagues, and about the bigness of the Isle of Rhodes. It was full of hills and covered with trees. And then going 15 leagues from there, we found a passing good haven, situated on a parallel of Rome at 41 degrees and 2/3. The mouth of the haven lies open to the south, a half a league broad, and then it goes east and north, and it stretches for 12 leagues, and then this gulf, 20 leagues in circumference, in which there are 5 small islands. Well, Hakluyt even added a footnote confirming that this was the country of Sir H.G. This refers to Sir Humphrey Gilbert's expedition of 1582 and 1583. Gosnold explored Cape Cod, Martha's Vineyard, which he named for his daughter, and Elizabeth Island, which he named after his sister, who probably had been named after the Queen. Well, Gosnold and his crew had journeyed over 3,000 miles from England. Now he was only 25 miles from the mouth of Refugio, or Narragansett Bay. How could he get so close, but still not find this large, distinctive bay? Modern-day Cuttyhunk. To investigate further, I took a short ferry ride from New Bedford to Cuttyhunk, the westernmost of the Elizabethan Islands. These islands make up the town of Gosnold, the least populated town in Massachusetts. The island of Cuttyhunk is only about 2.5 miles long by 1 mile wide. Fewer than 100 people live there year-round, and in the summer the population swells to 400. There's only one grocery store, one restaurant, and the main mode of transportation is the golf cart, but there is no golf course. Director Catherine Ballestieri and the friendly staff of the Cuttyhunk Historical Society gave me the local scoop on Gosnold's momentous 1-month visit that took place over 400 years ago. Here's why I think Gosnold failed to find Refugio. James Mavor, historian and scientist at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, provides this logical explanation. It was because Gosnold approached the region from the north, and he missed the right clues. In June of 1602, Bartholomew Gosnold, with 32 men on the small bark the Concord, left Falmouth, England, which is about 50 degrees north latitude. They arrived at the coast of America at Cape Elizabeth, Maine, which is just south of Portland, about 43 degrees north latitude. Then he sailed down the coast, stopping in York, Maine, and then sailing into Provincetown Harbor, where he is credited with naming Cape Cod. Exploring Cape Cod Bay, he entered Barnstable Harbor and looked for the tallest hill he could find to do some reconnaissance. Mavor suggests that Gosnold climbed Chute Flying Hill, which is at 41 2/3 degrees north latitude, precisely the same latitude that Verrazzano describes. This hill, which is about a mile south of Barnstable Harbor, is only 52 feet high, but that's pretty high for Cape Cod. Looking south or southwest, he probably would have seen a prominent triangular island, Martha's Vineyard, which he named after his daughter Martha. If it was a sunny day, the triangular Martha's Vineyard, about 20 miles away, would be silhouetted by the sparkling ocean. Gosnold probably concluded that he had located that navigational signpost, Verrazzano's Triangular Island. But Verrazzano's Triangular Island, or Block Island, works better as a signpost if you approach it from the west or the south. And as it is 80 miles southwest of Chute Flying Hill, Gosnold couldn't even see it. In fact, Block Island isn't even visible from the highest point of Cuttyhunk. So Gosnold sailed around Cape Cod, outside of Cape Cod Bay, around the tip of Provincetown, around the Cape of Chatham, and through Nantucket Sound, through Vineyard Sound, and came upon the huge Buzzard's Bay. Perhaps he felt that he had indeed found Refugio. Buzzard's Bay, which is 28 miles long by 8 miles wide, is even larger than Narragansett Bay. Entering this bay, which he called Gosnold's Hope, he pulled into the first island on the right, which is now called Cuttyhunk. This odd name